A millionaire saw his pregnant ex-wife cleaning tables at his wedding. But what did he do next? It was a beautiful day. One of those days when the sky looks like it was painted with strokes of blue and gold just to impress those below. The breeze was light like a sigh, and the flowers seemed to smile at the guests arriving at the grand hall where everything would take place. It was the wedding of dreams, or at least it was supposed to be. Ethan Carter, the most talked about billionaire of the moment, was about to walk down the aisle with Olivia Stone, a woman as powerful as he was, but with a touch of elegance that made anyone stop and take notice. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make even the walls feel intimidated. Together, they were the perfect couple, at least in theory. And the guests? Oh, the guests. They came from all corners, bringing with them stories of success, fortune, and influence. There were businessmen, politicians, celebrities, and, of course, those who simply liked to be close to important people. The hall was decorated with fresh flowers, twinkling lights, and details that screamed luxury. Each table had its own floral arrangement. Each chair looked like it had been polished by hand by someone who truly loved their job. Everything there was lavish, expensive, and, well, over the top. But Ethan didn't look as radiant as he should. He paced back and forth backstage, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. His eyes were fixed on the mirror, but it was as if he wasn't really seeing his own reflection. Something was bothering him, something he couldn't name. Maybe it was the weight of expectation. Maybe it was the fact that, despite all that wealth and power, he still felt a strange emptiness inside. "Are you ready?" The voice came from behind, soft but firm. It was Olivia, already dressed in a long white gown that looked like it had come straight out of a fairy tale. Her smile was confident, almost challenging, as if she knew no one there could take her place beside Ethan. But there was something else in her eyes, something Ethan couldn't quite decipher. He just nodded, saying nothing. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, a discreet figure entered through the back. Lily, yes, that Lily, Ethan's ex-wife. She wore a simple uniform, held a tray, and tried to go unnoticed. But how could someone like her go unnoticed, even pregnant? She had a presence that drew attention. Her hair was tied up in a rushed bun, and her hands trembled slightly as she served champagne to the guests. Lily knew that taking that job as a waitress at Ethan's wedding was a bad idea. But what choice did she have? Victor, a man Ethan knew all too well, had made it clear that she had no option. "You will be there," he said, with a smile that felt more like a threat. "And you will do as I say." So there she was, trying to keep her head down and avoid looking directly at Ethan. But fate has a funny way of playing with people. In a moment of distraction, Lily lifted her eyes and met Ethan's. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but enough for both of them to feel the impact. Ethan froze, as if he had been punched in the gut. His face changed color, and he had to steady himself to keep from dropping the glass he was holding. Olivia noticed. Of course she did. She was the kind of woman who noticed everything, especially when it came to Ethan. Her smile remained intact, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice too calm to be natural. Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words, but before he could answer, Olivia was already moving toward the crowd, like a predator catching the scent of its prey. The tension in the air was palpable. It felt as if the ground could open up at any moment and swallow everyone whole. But as always, life has a way of making things even more complicated. And while Ethan tried to process what was happening, something bigger and much more dangerous was already unfolding. The hall was filled with laughter lively conversations, and the soft clinking of champagne glasses. It seemed like everyone there was living the perfect moment, the kind of scene you only see in movies or read about in books. But Ethan? Well, he was far from feeling anything close to happiness. His heart was pounding so hard, he could swear the people around him could hear it. It was like a drum echoing in his chest, each beat heavier than the last. Lily, she was there. He couldn't take his eyes off her. It wasn't possible. How did she have the nerve to show up in that place? And why the hell was she serving drinks like some ordinary waitress? A wave of anger surged up his throat, but it was quickly replaced by something even worse. Shame. Yes, shame. He knew the guests would start whispering the moment they realized who she was. They would talk about the failed marriage, the rumors, everything he had spent years trying to bury. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked again, this time with a sharper tone. She had stopped beside him, lightly crossing her arms as if she were ready to face anything. Ethan hesitated. He knew he needed to say something, anything, but the words just wouldn't come out. "Who is that woman?" Olivia pressed, discreetly pointing toward Lily, who was now busy serving a table in the far corner of the hall. Ethan took a deep breath, stalling for time. "She's someone from the past," he muttered, avoiding Olivia's gaze. The answer was vague, intentionally vague, but Olivia wasn't a fool. She frowned, her lips forming a thin line. "From the past," she repeated, as if making sure she had heard correctly. Ethan just nodded, too much of a coward to say more. Meanwhile, Lily was trying to keep herself together. Every step she took seemed to drain energy. She didn't even know she had left. Serving champagne should have been a simple task, right? But there, in that crowded hall full of people who barely looked at her, Lily felt like she was walking a tightrope. One misstep, and she could fall. She knew Victor was watching. He was probably somewhere among the guests, hiding, smiling with that arrogant expression she hated so much. He had made it clear he wanted to see her suffer, to see Ethan humiliated. "You'll pay for what you did," he had said days before, when he forced her to take the job. And now, here she was, trapped in a situation she had no way out of. But then something unexpected happened. As Lily handed a glass to a man in a black suit, she felt a hand touch her arm. It was firm, determined. She turned quickly, ready to apologize in case she had done something wrong, but froze when she saw who it was. Ethan. He was standing right there, just inches away, his expression a mix of anger, confusion, and something else, something she couldn't quite identify. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice low but tense. He glanced around, making sure no one was paying attention to them. Lily swallowed hard, searching for the right words. I didn't have a choice," she finally said, finding the courage to look him in the eyes. "Victor forced me." The mention of Victor's name made Ethan clench his fists. He had already suspected that man had something to do with this. Victor had always been a problem from the very beginning. He was the kind of person who smiled while planning your downfall, who pretended to be your friend while stabbing you in the back. Ethan knew that better than anyone. "This doesn't make sense," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Why would he do this? Why would you agree to it?" His voice was louder now, and a few nearby guests started looking in their direction. Lily noticed and grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him into a more discreet corner. "Listen," she said, almost pleading. "He threatened me. Ethan, he said he would do terrible things if I didn't obey. I had no choice." Ethan felt the weight of her words. He knew Victor well enough to be sure he wasn't bluffing, but still this was too much to process. He looked at Lily, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the sadness she was trying to hide. And then he noticed something that made his heart stop. For a second. Her stomach. She was pregnant. Pregnant? How was that possible? When? With whom? Lily? He started, but he couldn't finish. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, questions, emotions. He wanted to shout to demand answers, but he knew he couldn't do that. Not here. Not in front of all these people. Meanwhile, Olivia watched everything from a distance. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she didn't need to. It was enough to see the way Ethan looked at that woman, how completely lost he seemed in her presence. Olivia felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she didn't like one bit. She had always known Ethan had a complicated past, but she never imagined he was still tied to it. And now, there, on the day that was supposed to be the most important of their lives, she was starting to question everything. Lily noticed Olivia's stare and felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew she was ruining something big, something Ethan had carefully built. But what could she do? She hadn't asked to be there. She hadn't asked to be put in this situation. All she wanted was to protect herself. And the baby. Ethan finally stepped back, but not before giving Lily one last look. A look that said so much, but left even more unanswered. He returned to the altar, where Olivia was waiting for him with a forced smile and a dangerous gleam in her eyes. The wedding hadn't even started yet, but it was already clear that this day would be far more complicated than any of them could have imagined. Ethan was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He could barely focus on what was happening around him. The ballroom was still filled with laughter and lively conversations, but to him, everything felt distant, like he was hearing the world through a thick wall of glass. His mind kept spinning, trying to piece together the puzzle Lily had just thrown in his lap. Pregnant? How was that possible? And why was Victor involved in all of this? He needed answers. Now, Olivia, he said, turning to his fiancée with an expression that was a mix of urgency and guilt. I need to take care of something. I'll be right back. Before she could respond, Ethan was already walking away, crossing the ballroom with long, determined strides. Olivia stood there, watching him leave, her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew something was wrong, and it unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Ethan found Lily backstage, where the staff were organizing trays of food and drinks. She was alone, leaning against a wall, trying to catch her breath. When she saw him approaching, Lily felt her heart race. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but that didn't mean she was ready for it. What the hell is going on, Lily? Ethan demanded, his voice low but filled with intensity. He crossed his arms, trying to keep his composure, but his eyes betrayed him. You show up here, pregnant, waiting tables at my wedding, and now you're telling me Victor forced you to do this? It doesn't make any sense. Lily sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to ward off a headache. I know it sounds crazy, she admitted, hesitant. But Victor, he knows things, Ethan, things about us. Things you'd probably rather no one ever found out. Those words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly what Lily was referring to. There were secrets in their past, secrets he had buried deep, hoping they'd never resurface. But now, with Victor involved, it felt like everything was about to come crashing down. What does he know, Lily? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, invading her space, not to intimidate her, but because he needed to hear the truth up close. What is he planning? Lily hesitated, biting her lower lip. She knew telling the truth could make things worse, but she also knew she had no choice. He knows about the divorce, she finally admitted, the words rushing out as if she wanted to get them over with. About the real reason we split up. He knows what happened that night. Ethan, the real reason I left. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. That night, the night he had tried to forget so many times, only for it to haunt him over and over again. He knew that secret had the power to destroy everything he had built since then. And now Victor was using it against him. But why now? Ethan asked, frustrated. Why is he doing this after all this time? Because he can, Lily said simply, sadness lacing her voice. Victor always wanted to see you fall. Ethan, he never accepted that you got everything while he got nothing. And now he has something that can ruin you. Ethan ran a hand down his face, trying to process everything. It was too much to handle. He knew Victor was dangerous, but he never imagined he would go this far. And now, with Lily pregnant and caught in the middle, everything was even more complicated. And the baby? Ethan asked, his voice almost breaking. Who's the father? Lily looked at him, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. I can't tell you that right now, she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Not here, not like this. Her response only left Ethan more confused and furious. He wanted to demand answers, to make her tell him everything, but he knew he couldn't. Not here, not now. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You need to get out of here, he finally said, his voice firm. Victor is playing with fire, and I'm not going to let him hurt you. Or the baby. Lily shook her head, hesitant. I can't just leave. Ethan, he'll know. He'll find me. Then I'll protect you, Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. No matter what, I'll make sure you and the baby are safe. His words sounded sincere, but Lily felt a knot in her stomach. She knew Ethan was trying to do the right thing, but she also knew it could cost him. Cost both of them. Everything. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Olivia was watching. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw the way Ethan looked at Lily, how lost he seemed in her presence, and it unsettled her a lot. She had always known Ethan had a complicated past, but she never imagined he was still so tangled in it. And now, on the very day that was supposed to be the most important of their lives, she was starting to question everything. What the hell is going on, Ethan? Olivia muttered to herself, her eyes locked on him. She knew she had to find out the truth, but she also knew it wouldn't be easy. Ethan was good at hiding things, especially when it came to his past. Backstage, the tension between Ethan and Lily was thick. Ethan knew he had to act fast. Victor was behind all of this, and he needed to figure out what else the man was planning. But before he could even think of a plan, he heard footsteps approaching. Oh, what a touching scene, a familiar voice said, dripping with sarcasm. Victor. He appeared in the hallway, a smug smile on his face and a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Looks like the great Ethan Carter still has a soft spot for the waitress. Ethan felt his blood boil. He turned to face Victor, his fists clenched. What do you want, Victor? He asked, his voice seething with anger. What the hell are you planning? Victor chuckled, as if he was thoroughly enjoying himself. Oh, Ethan, you've always been so predictable. I just want to see you fall. And it looks like I've finally found the perfect way to make that happen. His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, leaving Ethan and Lily in silence. Victor was playing a dangerous game, and they both knew this was far from over. Victor stood there, a shadow that refused to disappear even under the brightest light. His smile was wide, almost theatrical, as if he were in absolute control of the situation. And in a way, he was. Ethan felt the weight of that gaze, a mix of triumph and disdain, as he struggled to keep his composure. But inside him, something was boiling like a pot about to overflow. You've always been good at causing trouble, Victor, Ethan said, his voice low but sharp. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. But this has gone too far. What do you want with her? With me? Victor tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question, but his eyes never left Ethan's. "Ah, my dear friend, or should I say ex-friend, it's not that simple." He crossed his arms, adopting a relaxed stance, as if they were just chatting about the weather. "I just want justice, Ethan. Justice for everything you took from me." "I took nothing from you." Ethan shot back, his voice rising a notch. He could feel the anger bubbling inside him, threatening to break free. "You made your own choices, Victor. I had nothing to do with that." Victor laughed, a cold, dry sound that echoed through the backstage area. "Choices? Do you really believe that?" He shook his head, as if disappointed. "You've always had everything, Ethan. Money, power, success, and now even a beautiful, influential new wife." He cast a quick glance at Lily, who stood there trying to make herself invisible. "And me? I got the scraps. I was always second place, the one no one noticed." Ethan frowned, confused. "What are you talking about? This has nothing to do with me. You created your own problems, Victor. I'm not responsible for your failures, aren't you?" Victor asked, his voice growing darker. He took a step closer, his presence looming. "You were always the golden boy, the one who got everything without effort. While I struggled, you just showed up, and when I finally thought I had a chance to shine, you ruined everything." Those words hit Ethan like an unexpected blow. He had always known Victor was competitive, but he had never realized how deep the rivalry ran. "What did I do, Victor? Tell me exactly what I did to deserve this." Victor smiled again, but this time there was something darker in his expression. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Ethan. That merger, remember? The deal I spent months negotiating, trying to close. And then you walked in with your charm and your promises, and simply took it all away from me. That's when I realized I would never stand a chance against you. Never." Ethan stood in silence for a moment, processing those words. Yes, he remembered the merger. It had been one of the biggest deals of his career, a deal that secured his place at the top of the corporate world. But he had never thought Victor had been involved in it. To him, it had been just another business move, another victory. Now, seeing the hatred in Victor's eyes, he began to understand the depth of the man's resentment. "And so, you decided to take revenge on me?" Ethan asked, disbelief in his voice. "Over a business deal? That's ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" Victor repeated, his voice rising. "You have no idea what I went through after that day, Ethan. My reputation was destroyed. Doors were shut in my face. And all because you thought you could just walk in and take what was mine." Lily watched the scene in silence, feeling like an unwilling spectator to something far bigger than herself. She had always known Victor was dangerous, but she had never realized his hatred for Ethan ran so deep. And now, caught between the two men, she felt the weight of the situation. It was like being in the middle of a storm, where every word was a lightning bolt ready to strike. "This has nothing to do with her, Victor," Ethan said, gesturing toward Lily. "Leave her out of this. She did nothing to you." Victor laughed again, but this time there was something cruel in his tone. "Oh, but she has everything to do with this, Ethan. She's the one weakness you never managed to hide. And now, with that baby..." He looked at Lily, a smile on his face that felt more like a threat. "Well, let's just say this opens up a lot of interesting possibilities." Ethan felt his blood run cold. He knew exactly what Victor was implying. The man was playing dirty, using Lily and the baby as pawns in his game of revenge. And that made Ethan furious. "You won't lay a finger on her," Ethan said, his voice deadly serious. He took another step forward, standing face to face with Victor. "If you touch her or the baby, I swear I will destroy you." Victor raised his hands in mock surrender, but his smile didn't fade. Relax, Ethan. No need to be so dramatic. I just want you to understand what it feels like to be humiliated, like I was. And today, well, today is the perfect day for that. Before Ethan could respond, Victor turned on his heel and began walking away, as if he knew he had already planted the seed of chaos. He paused for a moment, glancing over his shoulder. Oh, and Ethan, enjoy the rest of your wedding, because after today, nothing will ever be the same. With those words, Victor disappeared down the corridor, leaving Ethan and Lily alone once again. The air felt heavy, thick with tension and fear. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, but he knew this was far from over. Lily, he said finally, turning to her, we need to get out of here. Now, Lily nodded, still trembling. She knew Victor wasn't bluffing. He was capable of anything. And now, with that secret hanging over them, everything felt even more dangerous. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Olivia continued to watch from a distance. She saw Ethan return to the altar, his expression a mixture of anger and worry. Something was happening, something big, and she knew she needed to find out what it was. But before she could get closer, Ethan was already being called back to the ceremony. The priest began to speak, but Ethan could barely hear the words. His mind was elsewhere, thinking about Victor, about Lily, about the baby, and about everything that was about to come crashing down. The hall was silent, except for the priest's words echoing softly in the air. The guests watched attentively, some with discreet smiles, others with curious glances. But Ethan, he could barely hear what was being said. His mind was elsewhere, or rather, on someone else. Lily, the baby, Victor. Everything swirled inside him like a storm, and he knew he needed answers before it was too late. The ceremony continued, but Ethan was only pretending. His I do was almost automatic, devoid of emotion, as if he were reciting something memorized long ago. Olivia noticed. Of course she did. She was sharp, always attuned to details. And that empty I do was enough to trigger a red flag in her mind. As soon as the ceremony ended and the applause filled the hall, Olivia pulled Ethan aside to a discreet corner. What's going on, Ethan? She asked, her voice low but firm. There was no room for excuses or evasions. Who is that woman? And why do you look so lost? Ethan hesitated. He knew he couldn't tell Olivia everything, at least not at that moment. But he also knew he couldn't keep hiding things from her. It's complicated, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. A habit he always had when nervous. Lily, she's from my past. Someone I thought I had left behind. Olivia crossed her arms, her eyes fixed on him. She's pregnant. Ethan, do you know who the father is? That direct question caught Ethan off guard. He felt the weight of Olivia's words, as if she were trying to extract something from him. I don't know, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. She hasn't told me. Olivia frowned, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. You don't know? What do you mean you don't know? Ethan, this doesn't make sense. She shows up here, pregnant, serving tables at our wedding, and you don't know who the baby's father is? That's ridiculous. Ethan sighed, feeling the weight of the situation grow heavier by the second. I know it sounds crazy, Olivia, but there's more going on here. Things I'm still trying to figure out. Things? Olivia repeated, incredulously. What kind of things? Ethan, we're married now. Or at least we're supposed to be, starting our life together. And you're telling me there are things from your past that you haven't moved on from. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to be honest with Olivia, but He also knew that telling her everything could make things worse, especially because he himself didn't fully understand what was happening. Olivia, I promise I'll explain everything. But right now, I need to deal with this first. Deal with what? Ethan? Olivia asked, her voice rising slightly. What exactly do you need to deal with? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still stuck in your past. Stuck with her. Those words cut through Ethan like a knife. He knew Olivia was right, at least in part. He still felt something for Lily, something he had never been able to completely erase. But he also knew it wasn't fair to Olivia. She deserved more than a man torn between two worlds. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Lily was trying to keep calm. She knew Ethan was in a difficult position, and that his choices would affect not just him, but also the baby. She placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the weight of responsibility. What have I done? She murmured to herself, tears welling in her eyes. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the venue staff approached her, handing her a white envelope. This arrived for you, he said before quickly walking away. Lily frowned, confused. She wasn't expecting anything. She carefully opened the envelope, and her heart stopped as she read the few handwritten words. If you say a word about the baby, everyone will know the truth, including Ethan. It was Victor. He was watching her every move, making sure she stayed silent. Lily felt the air escape her lungs. She knew Victor was capable of anything, and now he was using the baby as leverage. She had to protect her child at any cost. Back in the hall, Ethan was trying to calm Olivia. Please trust me, he said, holding her hands. I know this seems crazy, but I'll fix everything. I promise. Olivia stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she should believe him or not. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh. I trust you, Ethan, but you need to give me a good reason to keep trusting you. Because right now, I'm starting to question everything. Those words hung in the air like a dark cloud over them. Ethan knew he had to act fast. He needed to find out the truth about the baby, about Lily, about Victor. But more importantly, he needed to decide what really mattered to him. Meanwhile, somewhere in the hall, Victor was watching everything from a distance. He smiled, knowing his plan was working perfectly. Ethan was trapped in a web of secrets and lies, and Victor was ready to pull the right strings to tear everything apart. But what Victor didn't know was that Ethan was about to do something he would never expect, something that would change everything. The hall was filled with a strange atmosphere, as if the air itself carried unspoken secrets and suppressed emotions. Every passing second felt like an eternity to Ethan. He knew he had to make a decision, and fast. But how could he choose between the past and the present? Between Lily and Olivia? Between the truth and the consequences? Meanwhile, Olivia was at her limit. She had always been a strong woman, accustomed to dealing with difficult situations and complicated people. But this was different. Ethan was distant, lost in thoughts she couldn't decipher. And that woman, Lily, seemed to be at the center of it all. Olivia knew she had to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting Ethan head-on. You still have feelings for her, don't you? Olivia asked, her voice low but sharp. She stared at Ethan, her eyes locked onto his, as if trying to see straight into his soul. Don't lie to me, Ethan. I deserve to know. Ethan hesitated. He wanted to deny it, to say that this was all just a misunderstanding. But he knew that would be a lie. Olivia, he began, his voice almost faltering. I don't know what I feel. This is all happening so fast. I need to understand what's going on before I make any decisions. That response made Olivia furious. understand what's going on? Ethan, we just got married. You should be here with me, focused on our future. But instead, you're obsessed with your past. With her past. Ethan felt the weight of Olivia's words. She was right. He was torn, trapped between two worlds that seemed impossible to reconcile. But he also knew he couldn't just ignore Lily and the baby, not with Victor involved, not with so many unanswered questions. I know it sounds crazy, Ethan finally said, frustration lacing his voice. But I can't just pretend none of this is happening. Lily is pregnant, Olivia. And Victor, he's using it against me. Against us? Olivia shook her head, incredulous. Victor? What does he have to do with this? Why would he do this? For revenge, Ethan replied, his voice dark. He's always blamed me for something that happened years ago, something I didn't even know had affected his life so much. Now he's trying to destroy everything I've built, including us. Those words hit Olivia like a punch. She had always known Ethan had enemies, but she had never imagined someone would be cruel enough to use such a personal situation to hurt him. And now, trapped in this whirlwind of secrets and betrayals, she was beginning to question everything. So, what are you going to do, Ethan? Olivia asked, her voice laced with pain. Are you going to chase after your past? Are you going to throw away everything we built together for a woman who was once part of your life? Ethan felt his chest tighten. He knew Olivia was hurting, and it pained him more than he wanted to admit. I don't know, Olivia. I need to deal with this first. I need to protect Lily and the baby. If Victor is involved, then everyone is in danger. That answer was the final straw for Olivia. She felt something inside her break, as if all her hopes and dreams were crumbling before her eyes. Protect Lily, she repeated, her voice trembling with anger and heartbreak. You're more worried about her than you are about me? About our marriage? Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to fix things, to make Olivia understand. But he also knew that, at this moment, anything he said could make things worse. So he just stood there, silent, as Olivia struggled to hold back tears. I trusted you, Ethan, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I really did. But now I'm starting to wonder if I made the right choice. With those words, Olivia walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the middle of the hall. He watched as she disappeared into the crowd, her white dress like a ghost dissolving into the sea of guests. The weight of their conversation bore down on him. He knew he had hurt Olivia, perhaps irreparably, but he also knew he couldn't just ignore what was happening. Backstage, Lily sat in a corner, trying to process everything. She knew Ethan was torn, that he was trying to protect her, and the baby from Victor. But she also knew this was costing him dearly, costing all of them. She placed a hand over her stomach again, feeling the weight of responsibility. She didn't want to be the reason Ethan and Olivia were falling apart. She didn't want to be the reason Ethan was risking everything. But what could she do? Victor was controlling everything, moving the pieces of the board like a chess master. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. It was Ethan. He looked exhausted, as if he had run an emotional marathon. We need to get out of here, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Now, Lily nodded, quickly standing up. She knew Ethan was right. Staying here was dangerous. For her, for the baby, for everyone. But as they made their way toward the backstage exit, something unexpected happened. Victor appeared again, blocking their path. His grin was wide, almost triumphant. Leaving so soon? He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But the party's just getting started. Ethan felt anger bubbling up inside him again. Get out of the way, Victor. This has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with me? Victor laughed, as if the idea were absurd. "Oh, Ethan, do you really think you can just run away? That you can leave all of this behind? You know what I'm capable of. And I will do it if you try to escape." Those words hung in the air, leaving Ethan and Lily frozen in place. Victor was playing dirty, and they knew he wasn't bluffing. But Ethan also knew he couldn't back down. "Not now. You won't win, Victor," Ethan finally said, his voice deathly calm. "No matter what you do, I will protect Lily and the baby, no matter the cost." Victor's grin widened. But this time, there was something darker behind it. "We'll see, Ethan, we'll see." With those words, Victor stepped aside, letting them go. The air was heavy, thick with tension and fear, but Ethan knew he had to move quickly. He had to find a way to stop Victor, to protect the people he cared about. And as they stepped out of the hall, Ethan had the sinking feeling that something bigger was about to happen, something that would change everything. The night air was cold, almost cutting, as if the weather itself were in tune with the emotional storm unfolding within Ethan and Lily. They walked quickly, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the ballroom where everything had begun to fall apart. But Ethan knew it wouldn't be that simple to escape Victor. The man was like a persistent shadow, always lurking, ready to strike when least expected. "Where are we going now?" Lily asked, her voice trembling with nerves. She instinctively held her belly, as if trying to shield the baby from something invisible, but equally dangerous. "Victor will find us, Ethan. He always does." Ethan pressed his lips together, trying to think of a plan. He knew Lily was right. Victor wouldn't give up easily. But he also knew he had to get her out of there before it was too late. "We're going somewhere safe," he finally said, his voice firm but urgent. "I know someone who can help us. Someone I trust." Lily nodded, though she still looked uncertain. She wanted to believe in Ethan, to trust that he could protect her. But fear was stronger than anything else at that moment. The feeling of being hunted, of being just another piece in a game far bigger than she could comprehend, was suffocating. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Olivia was trying to process everything that had just happened. She watched as the guests danced and laughed, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind the scenes. But Olivia couldn't relax. Her mind was on Ethan, on Lily, on everything he had said, or left unsaid. She knew she had to find out more. She couldn't just accept this situation without a fight. So she decided to take action. Discreetly, she looked around for someone who might have information about Lily, maybe a staff member, or even a guest who had known Ethan for a long time. She needed to understand what was going on, even if it meant confronting her own emotions. But while Olivia was searching for answers, Victor was already setting the next phase of his plan into motion. He knew Ethan and Lily had left, and that only made him more determined to expose the truth and humiliate Ethan in the process. Taking the microphone from the master of ceremonies, he called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice smooth but laced with venom. "Before we continue this wonderful celebration, I'd like to share something interesting." He paused dramatically, ensuring that all eyes were on him. Something that some of you may have already noticed, but that deserves to be revealed. Guests exchanged curious glances, unsure of what to expect. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach, immediately sensing that something was about to go terribly wrong. "Ethan Carter," Victor continued, his tone growing more theatrical. "A man we all admire, right? A man who seems to have it all. Wealth, power, success. But what many of you don't know is that not everything is as perfect as it seems." He smiled, as if he were about to tell a fascinating story. Today, on his wedding day, something unusual happened. The crowd murmured in intrigue. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. She knew exactly where Victor was going with this, and it infuriated her. A woman showed up today, Victor went on, his grin widening. A woman from Ethan's past. And not just that, she's pregnant. Another pause as he savored the moment. Pregnant, ladies and gentlemen. And from the looks of it, Ethan knows more about this than he's willing to admit. The ballroom fell silent for a moment before erupting into murmurs and whispers. Guests looked at each other in shock. Olivia felt her blood boil. She knew Victor was trying to destroy Ethan, but she never imagined he would go this far. So public, so cruel. This is ridiculous, Olivia shouted, storming toward Victor. You have no right to spread lies about Ethan. Lies? Victor repeated, feigning surprise. Oh, my dear, these aren't lies. They're facts. And if Ethan wants to deny them, then he should come here and say so himself. Olivia knew Ethan wasn't there to defend himself. He had left with Lily, likely trying to protect her, and himself from Victor. But that didn't mean she was going to let Victor continue his twisted spectacle. You're playing with things you don't understand, Victor, Olivia said, her voice deadly calm. If you keep this up, you're going to regret it. Victor laughed, as if he didn't take her seriously. Oh, my dear, do you really think you can threaten me? I'm just telling the truth. And the truth, Olivia, is that Ethan Carter is not the perfect man everyone thinks he is. His words echoed through the ballroom, making everyone uneasy. Olivia knew she had to do something to stop Victor, but she also knew he was playing his cards right. He had planted the seed of doubt, and now it was up to Ethan and her to try and undo the damage. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lily were far from the chaos, searching for refuge. But Ethan knew Victor wouldn't stop. He knew the man was about to expose everything, including the secrets Ethan had tried so hard to keep buried. He's coming after us, isn't he? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression dark. Yes, and when he does, we need to be ready. Ethan and Lily were in a small apartment in the suburbs, a discreet place Ethan knew from simpler times. It was an improvised refuge, far from prying eyes and the cameras that Victor had undoubtedly already sent after them. The space was modest, with old furniture and walls worn by time, but for them, at that moment, it was a safe harbor in the midst of a raging storm. Do you think he knows where we are? Lily asked, sitting on the worn-out couch, as she tried to calm her nerves. Her hand remained over her belly, as if her touch could protect the baby from the chaos around them. She looked exhausted, her eyes filled with worry and fear. I don't know, Ethan replied, pacing back and forth in the small room. He was restless, his mind racing. But we can't stay here for long. Victor will find us. He always does. Lily sighed, shaking her head. I should never have taken this job. I knew this would go wrong. I just wanted to protect the baby. Her voice faltered at the end, and she lowered her head, trying to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan stopped pacing and sat beside her, placing his hand over hers in a gesture meant to offer reassurance, or maybe to seek some for himself. Listen, Lily, I know you're scared. I am too, but we're not going to let him win. Not this time. Lily looked up at him, surprised by the determination in his voice. There was something different about Ethan now, something she hadn't seen in a long time. He seemed resolved, ready to fight, and that gave her a glimmer of hope. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Victor has everything planned out. He knows exactly how to hurt us. Ethan took a deep breath, thinking he knew they needed help. He couldn't face Victor alone, especially when the man had so many resources at his disposal. But who could help them? who would be willing to take on someone as dangerous as Victor. Then, suddenly, an idea struck him. Someone he never imagined he would turn to for help, but who might be the only person who truly understood the gravity of the situation. Olivia, Ethan said finally, almost to himself. What? Lily asked, confused. You want to involve Olivia in this? After everything that happened? I know it sounds crazy, Ethan admitted, running a hand over his face in frustration. But Olivia is smart. She understands Victor's game better than anyone. And no matter how much I've hurt her, I know she won't let him destroy everything we've built. Lily hesitated, but eventually nodded. Maybe you're right, but how are we going to find her? And how are we supposed to convince her to help after everything that's happened today? Ethan didn't have all the answers, but he knew he had to try. He picked up his phone and sent a quick message to Olivia, telling her he needed to speak with her urgently. He knew she was probably furious, hurt, maybe even ready to walk away from him for good. But he also knew that, deep down, Olivia was a woman of principles, and she wouldn't let Victor win. Meanwhile, back at the ballroom, Olivia was still trying to process the chaos Victor had created. The guests continued whispering among themselves, speculating about Ethan, Lily, and the supposed scandal. Olivia knew this was exactly what Victor wanted, to create a public narrative that would destroy Ethan's reputation. But she also knew she had to act fast to keep things from spiraling further. When her phone vibrated in her purse, she hesitated before picking it up. Seeing Ethan's name on the screen, part of her wanted to ignore the message, but something inside her, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a last shred of hope, compelled her to open it. I need your help. It's important. Please meet me at the address I'm sending you. Olivia frowned, torn between anger and concern. She knew Ethan was involved in something big, something far beyond their wedding. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the fact that Victor was playing dirty, and that if she didn't intervene, Ethan would be ruined. After a few moments of hesitation, Olivia made up her mind. She needed to hear him out. She needed to uncover the truth. All of it before making any final decisions. When she arrived at the apartment, Ethan and Lily were there to greet her. The air was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken emotions. Olivia stared at Ethan for a long moment, her eyes full of silent questions. Before you say anything, Ethan started, his voice steady but gentle. I need you to listen to me. Everything that happened today, it's more complicated than it seems. Victor is behind all of this. He's trying to destroy me, and now Lily and the baby are caught in the middle. Olivia crossed her arms, clearly skeptical. And what do you expect me to do, Ethan? Just ignore everything? Pretend none of this matters? No, Ethan answered quickly. I just need you to help me stop Victor. He won't stop until we're all ruined. And I know you're the only person who truly understands how he plays this game. Olivia hesitated, but there was something in the way Ethan spoke, something in his sincerity, that made her reconsider. She glanced at Lily, who sat silently, visibly afraid. And then, finally, Olivia nodded. All right, she said firmly. I'll help, but not for you, Ethan, for the baby, and because Victor needs to be stopped. Those words lifted a weight off Ethan's shoulders. He knew winning Olivia over wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that with her on their side, they had a real chance at defeating Victor. The three of them began to strategize. Olivia had valuable contacts, people who could help expose Victor's illegal activities. Ethan knew where to find evidence, documents that could prove Victor had been orchestrating everything from the start. And Lily, though scared, was willing to cooperate, even if it meant putting her own safety at risk. Let's do this, Olivia said finally, her voice filled with determination. But it won't be easy. Victor won't go down without a fight." "I know," Ethan replied, looking at the two women beside him, "but we're not going to let him win. Not this time." The three were united now, each playing their part in the plan. Olivia used her contacts to access documents that proved Victor's illegal activities, fraud, blackmail, and manipulations he had been hiding for years. Ethan knew exactly where to find the final evidence in an old property Victor had once used as a base for his schemes. "He would never imagine we'd keep everything here," Ethan murmured as he searched through an abandoned office on the property. They found folders full of incriminating records, along with recordings that exposed his deceit. Victor, on the other hand, was confident. He believed he had won, certain that he had destroyed Ethan's reputation and isolated Lily. But his arrogance was his downfall. When the evidence was handed over to the authorities, there was no escape. The police arrived swiftly, arresting him before he could react. "You lost, Victor," Ethan said as he watched him being handcuffed. "This was never about money or power. It was about the harm you inflicted on people." Victor only smiled bitterly. "You think this is the end? This changes nothing." But it did. Olivia, seeing the damage Victor had caused, chose to step away from Ethan, not out of hatred, but to rebuild her own life. She knew that, despite everything, there was still respect between them. Ethan and Lily, finally free from Victor's shadow, began to face their own past mistakes. Together, they realized that the truth was the first step toward fixing what had been broken. The weight of everything that had happened finally began to fade. Ethan and Lily sat in silence, side by side, in the same modest apartment that had sheltered them through those turbulent days. The air was still heavy with unspoken emotions, but something had changed. There was a sense of relief, as if the world had finally stopped spinning so fast. "I'm sorry," Ethan said at last, his voice low, almost a whisper. He looked at Lily, his eyes filled with sincerity. "For everything, for not being there when you needed me most, for letting Victor drive us apart." Lily shook her head, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "It's not just about you, Ethan. I made mistakes too. I let fear control me, push me away from the people I loved." She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. "But now we have another chance. A chance to make things right." Ethan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were wounds to heal, bridges to rebuild. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. "I need to know something," Ethan said hesitantly. "The baby, is it mine?" Lily looked at him, surprised by the direct question. She hesitated for a moment, but then realized it was time for the truth. "Yes, Ethan, the baby is yours." The words hit Ethan like lightning. He felt a whirlwind of emotions, shock, happiness, guilt, all at once. It was as if the universe had given him a second chance to be the man he should have always been. "I promise I'll be here this time," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be the father this baby deserves, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect both of you." Lily smiled, a genuine smile that lit up the small room. "I know you will, Ethan, but that doesn't mean it will be easy. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Meanwhile, Olivia was far away, trying to process everything that had happened. She knew she had made the right decision by stepping away from Ethan, not because she didn't love him anymore, but because she realized that the love she felt wasn't enough to erase the scars of the past. She needed time for herself to understand who she was beyond being the wife of a powerful billionaire. But despite the pain, she felt at peace. She knew she had made the right choice for both herself and Ethan. Sometimes, true love isn't about staying together, but about allowing the other person to find the path they truly need to follow. Back in the apartment, Ethan and Lily began planning for the future. They knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, difficult moments, and maybe even doubts. But they also knew that together, they could face anything. In the end, money and power are just numbers and empty titles if they aren't accompanied by real connections. True wealth lies in the relationships we build, the love we share, and the courage to face our mistakes with humility. Ethan had learned that success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by the positive impact you leave on the lives of those around you. And sometimes the greatest strength comes from admitting your flaws and fighting to make things right. After all, what truly matters isn't material wealth, but the memories, the bonds, and the legacy of kindness we leave behind.